Hey everyone, I wanted to give you some updated thoughts on the GT now that I've had a chance to ride it a little more, filming my roommate on his brand new GT. He's doing a little bit of a range test. Wanted to give you guys an update on the range. The Float Life board on the first day, it got about 10 miles. That was just some weird fluke. We don't know what happened, but it fixed itself. We just charged it overnight, and if you check out the Float Life's CBXR versus GT range test, you'll see exactly how that one did. This is my roommate going out. Shout out Grant. He weighs 185 pounds. You'll see in a bit, I did ride his board for maybe half a mile, a few minutes, and I weigh 140. But for the most part, it was him riding at 185 at 20 psi, just how it came from the box. And he rode 10 miles today and still had 60% battery at the end. So I think the estimated range that Future Motion gave is pretty realistic. I think if you're relatively lightweight, just doing pavement at 20 psi, you could hit 32 miles on a charge. Obviously, if you're heavier, if you lower your tire pressure, today there was actually a ton of wind. There was heavy wind today, so that didn't help. But there's lots of factors that will reduce your range, particularly riding any sort of off-road, loose terrain on trails. That will pretty drastically reduce your range. So this here is my first time riding the GT on pavement, aside for just going about 50 feet or so. The tire pressure is higher than I usually, little higher than I usually ride. This is at 20 psi. You'll see later in this video me riding at 9 psi. So while I am able to carve, I can slalom these lines, I'm just not quite feeling as balanced as I usually do. Some of that is getting used to the new board. Some of that is the tire pressure being a little high. And a lot of it is just that the board is a little too high. It feels like, a half-inch lift kit or tail rails where you're just riding a little bit higher, but you don't get the added benefits of the clearance. I should add that some people actually do like riding lifted for the carving. The general consensus is that riding lower gives you more stable and more confident carves. However, there is some personal preference there. Some people do like the feeling of riding a little higher off the ground. So just because I don't like the carving on the GT doesn't mean necessarily that you will not like it. It handles the gravel really nicely, partially thanks to the motor. And I think I'm about to try my first body varial right here. Yeah, that's my pretty sketch, almost died. That was my first body varial on a GT, and it was a little more difficult than I'm used to. You can also see it's my first time riding switch. I'm just feeling that higher platform, and that it feels, with this tire pressure, it feels like I'm riding on a bowling ball, and that I'm just a little too high off the ground. And the body varial back into my normal stance, a lot smoother than the first one. So you can see there is a bit of a learning curve here. You can totally get used to riding a one wheel of any shape, but after trying lots of different styles, I have a tire and a rail height that I prefer, and riding the GT just leaves a little bit to be desired compared to just other boards that I've ridden. So here we are at the Float Life parking lot. There's me. We've got Mercedes and Austin Silva. Jeff, Elijah, and Bodie is filming this. Just doing a little lunch run. I'm now riding at my more preferred tire pressure of about 9 psi. At 9 psi, this GT tire feels harder than most other one-wheel tires at 9 psi, both in terms of pushing on it with your thumbs when it's just on the ground, just kind of giving it a push, and also the feeling of just standing on it and kind of bouncing up and down. The tire is at 9 psi. To me, it feels more like 14, which is sort of just what would be recommended for me at my weight of 140. General rule of thumb, divide your body weight by 10. I like to ride it lower just for comfort. I don't really need the range. Ooh, you see the pushback there. So the pushback, it comes on quick at 19. It's very noticeable. And if you hover at 19, the tail will, go down for the pushback, and then the nose will go down to even back out, and it'll give you this really uncomfortable, wobbly feeling, not between toe and heel, but between nose and tail. And I think they did that absolutely on purpose to make you sort of less confident at, just to, the more confident you are, kind of the more likely you are to fall. So to me, the XR pushback is quite noticeable. I basically never go more than 18 miles an hour on an XR because of the pushback. It's very noticeable to me. I don't need to go more than 18. The GT is powerful, and you have no problem getting up to 19. So I think they want to make it super obvious when you hit 19. And that means that it just feels wobbly and weird. It's my first bonk. And as you can see, he's pointing, I hit the wrong spot. So we went for a big bonk, and we just got a little teeny tiny bonk out of it. So now that I have my target acquired, turning around, try to get a little bit of a better bonk over here, or volley. Boom! You can see went backside, shifted real hard backside. Part of that is just getting used to the board. On the GT, it really does have a tendency at the moment to slam the tail down when you land a drop or a bonk. So when I'm doing these, I'm kind of focusing on getting in front of the tire, and you can see here, super heavy on the nose almost like tombstones. That's just kind of me trying not to land on the tail, because at the moment the GT has a real tendency to land on the tail. The XR had the exact same issue when it first came out. They put out a firmware update, fixed it. So we're thinking that's not really going to be an issue. But it does, just dropping a curb, dropping a ledge. The GT does have this sort of weird tendency to scrape the tail. And by the way, we are in Highline mode. Everything in this video was filmed in Highline, which is kind of like the mission of the GT. Just sort of not too aggressive, but full speed. Was really pleasantly surprised with how that climbed right there. I felt like I barely needed to put any effort into getting up that little curb. That's the tail going down right there. And again, really pleasantly surprised with how that just climbed right up there. I thought it was going to be a lot more of a struggle to get up that curb. It's actually, higher than the bottom of the bumper. And I didn't nudge it, I just rode right up it. Just sort of slappy right up it. Ooh, we're about to hit the rock garden. That was a pretty tough one. Here's an easier one. The GT, it feels like kind of when you put your aggressiveness up too much, when you hit those rocks, it will react, it will overreact. The tail will slam down and then the nose will go down. Instead of staying nice and level and just having a little more give, a little more delay, it'll just way too snappy. Tail down, nose down, tail down, nose down, like a seesaw just going back and forth. So, I mean, you know, when custom settings come out, we'll play with that. The board reverts pretty much how an XR reverts. And look, oh, look at that smile. That's a happy Jake right there. Hashtag Chipotle. We're gonna be riding back 3 pounds heavier. So, yeah, I wanted to talk a little more about the Pushback. It really prevents me from going more than 20. On the XR, I felt that the Pushback was quite noticeable. I never ever went more than 18 on the pavement. When I was racing, like when I was strapped head to toe in protective gear and was trying specifically to race to go as fast as possible, on the XR I would hit 20, a little more than 20, and on W's maybe 23, 24. That was quite enough for me. I don't race anymore. I don't need to go that fast. Certainly not a speed demon like some of these guys. I just like to go at a comfortable speed. And on the GT, you feel very comfortable at 18. At 19, you feel real weird. And because the nose and the tail sort of alter, they go up, they go down, and it's unsettling. Because the board usually keeps you totally level, but at 19 on the GT, you really realize that you're on one wheel, and it almost feels like now all of a sudden you're balancing between nose and tail. And I think they absolutely did that on purpose. They wanted you to feel sort of unsettled at 19 so that you do not want to go faster. And if you try to push through, the nose gets really high. So the downside of all that is that if you happen to hit 19 as you are also hitting a bump or some sort of weird terrain, the board will buck you because that nose is already coming up really sharply, really quickly. And if that happens in combination with a change to the road surface, like a bump or a rock or a root, it can really buck you and throw you off balance. So I'd really like to see in the future some sort of settings for Pushback. Maybe after you ride 100 miles or something, you can unlock a mode where you have more choice over the Pushback. But it definitely feels different than the Pint Pushback. It feels different than the XR Pushback. And I think for beginner riders, it will be a lot more noticeable. I understand why they made it this way. But for more advanced riders, it really doesn't feel good. And it's not just a matter of going more than 20. It is a matter of being stable at around 19 or or 20. The carving, for me, not confidence inspiring. I've had some people tell me that riding lifted, they like the carving better, and that's just a matter of personal preference. You know, when I designed the half and halves, I designed them for the lift kit. The lowering kit was an afterthought. You know, I designed something that I thought would be really good for skate parks and pump tracks. And riding a half an inch higher, some people say they actually like the carving better. For me, it is not confidence inspiring. It just feels like it is more likely to tip over, and you know.
First launch run on the GT, what are your thoughts?
It's actually pretty good now that it's at my kind of preferred tire pressure. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at that right there. That's what we're talking about. Jeff said it was at 10 before I lowered it, so it's probably at like 8 now. I like it better. Pushback's a little weird, but it handles nicely. Acceleration is really good. It climbed up a curve, like just right up. So yeah, starting up like a little more.
Okay. Sick. Well, this concludes. I don't know what you're gonna call this, but yeah, boy, love you, whoever you're watching. See ya.